Tennessee has received its notice of allegations and why it's really not that big of a deal. All right, stay calm, carry on. I'll tell you exactly why. That and a whole lot more coming up on a Monday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. A new week, new episodes of Locked On Vols, and plenty of content to get into here today. I'm your host, Derek Kane. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen. And right off the bat, I'd like to personally thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions, they do apply. All right, so we've got the notice of allegations to get into here in segment one. SEC, the media predicted order of finish and the all-SEC preseason media teams, and my conversation with Trevon Flowers at SEC Media Days. A whole lot to get into. And again, we're going to spend probably a couple of days going over this notice of allegations, and I'm sure tomorrow for Twitter Tuesday, get in your questions, comments, concerns, whatever you guys have, _Kaner and at Locked On Balls on the YouTube channel, wherever. We're going to get into those, as the days go on. I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions, so just go ahead and fire those off for me tomorrow for Twitter Tuesday here on Locked On Balls. But you can find this on wherever you find your podcast and on YouTube, guys. Please rate, review, subscribe, and do all that good stuff there. So quickly, let's go over this notice of allegations. It came down, Friday afternoon. And guys, if I was at home, I would have probably done an emergency podcast Friday afternoon, Friday night, or maybe even on Saturday. But I was out of town all last week at SEC Media Days. As you know, I was out of town. I was still in Atlanta all weekend long. I just now got back in real time as I'm recording this Sunday night after a busy day. So this is the first time I could get in front of a microphone. So I do apologize. But whatever you guys want to know, you guys can always ask me. You guys know this. But we're going to quickly go over what is this notice of allegation, the blueprints, the Cliff Notes version, all that type of stuff, and really why I don't think that this is that big of a deal. First and foremost, let me get this out in the open. This was not a shock. Okay, this was expected. In fact, Tennessee was hoping to get its notice of allegations months ago. When you have your internal investigation, when you have an NCAA investigation, which is, the NCAA has been on your campus for over a year, right? When that investigation concludes, you will get a notice of allegations. Essentially, hey, we spent all this time interviewing and conducting our investigation into your program. This is what we saw. And that's what the notice of allegation was for Tennessee. So this is not a shock. This is not, they were expecting this. And in fact, they thought that they would get it earlier in the summer, to be frank. But it came down Friday afternoon. It was a 51-page document called the Notice of Allegations. Inside the Notice of Allegations, the NCAA found 18 Level 1 violations from the University of Tennessee and almost $60,000 worth of cash or gifts that provided to players and family by Pruitt, his wife Casey, assistant coaches Brian Niedermeyer, Shelton Felton, and Derek Ansley was mentioned in there a little bit, some recruiting staff members, and at least one booster, also a student's recruiting staff member as well. The NCAA credits the University of Tennessee for its exemplary cooperation and the steps that it took to rectify this situation. It did not find that the university lacked institutional control, which is huge. Those are two huge things right there, okay? It did not find that the university lacked an institutional control, and it praised the university on the steps that it took to rectify the situation. Those are two big things, which I think whenever this is all said and done, that you're going to look back on those two things and say, okay, well, that is why Tennessee's NCAA punishment was not that severe. Tennessee has 90 days to respond to this notice of allegations, essentially just saying, hey, we saw it, we agree with it, or we agree with this, we don't agree with that, whatever the case may be, and say we're ready to move forward. Then the NCAA has 60 days to respond to that response. A little confusing. Tennessee has 90 days to respond, say, okay, this is what we accept. The NCAA then just says, okay, and here's your punishment. So we are moving on through phase one, or really phase two, I guess, of what this is going to be a 4-step process essentially. So it was a big day for Tennessee. It was not a bad day in my opinion. And I'll tell you why. Again, the lack of institutional control was not the case here at Tennessee by the NCAA. And it continued to praise Tennessee for measures that it's taken to uncover things in the program, investigate into the program, and essentially to figure out exactly what was going on and the steps that it took. I mean, it fired its head coach, Jeremy Pruitt. It fired 2 members of his assistant coaching staff, and Brian Niedermeyer and Shelton Felton. It fired 8 recruiting staff members. Okay, that's what Tennessee did. It changed course, and it's done a whole lot of things that no one will ever know about. Tennessee self-imposed a number of scholarships last year. Tennessee is self-imposing a couple of scholarships this year. Tennessee was very much restricted in certain areas of recruiting over the past year with Josh Heupel, meaning you couldn't have as many official visitors. Some weekends you couldn't have any at all. Just things that the average fan might not know about at all. And Tennessee's continued to self-impose some of these small little things, moving forward. It did not self-impose a bowl season ban because the university didn't believe that anybody on campus here would, you didn't want to punish somebody that had nothing to do with anything in those regards. So a couple of things as well when you move forward. Let's see here. The punishment from the NCAA from Pruitt and Niedermeyer, as well as some recruiting staff members, probably some show causes are going to be in place for those coaches, maybe even for Jeremy Pruitt's wife, who was mentioned all throughout the notice of allegation for paying parents and players as well. Brian Niedermeyer and Shelton Felder were noted in the NOA for providing false information in the interviews in January of 2021. There are 18 major level 1 infractions, which are the worst, of course. There's 4 infractions per the NCAA. Level 1 is the worst. You had 12 staff members involved and over 200 individual violations. Violations in the COVID dead period are not going to help these individuals as well. Because keep in mind, remember, from March of 2020 all the way through the end of May 2021, not just Tennessee, but the entire college landscape was on a recruiting dead period, which meant you could not see a prospect face-to-face. You could not have official visitors. You could not have unofficial visitors. You could not host camp days and all that type of stuff. It was a recruiting dead period. And essentially all throughout this NOA, you have Tennessee arranging for prospects to come up on campus and paying for their stay. And that is obviously just a huge no-no. Here's some responses from Chancellor Donde Plowman from Tennessee. Quotes, this is from Friday as well. Earlier today, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, received a notice of allegations from the NCAA regarding the football program led by former head coach Jeremy Pruitt. In every step of this process, we took quick and decisive actions that exemplified the longstanding values of the NCAA reiterated in the membership's new constitution. The university hired outside counsel to fully investigate the allegations about the football program, acted promptly to terminate the employment of the football coaches and staff members, and shared our conclusions with the NCAA enforcement staff. The NCAA Division I Board of Directors recently endorsed significant reforms to the infractions process proposed by the Transformation Committee, including clearly and meaningfully insensitizing the type of response institutional actions we took in this case, self-detection and reporting, self-accountability, and the active involvement of the institutional's chief executive. The NCAA enforcement staff recognized the university's exemplary cooperation in the case, stating the actions taken by the institution during the investigation should be the standard for any institutional inquiries into potential violations. That's another big one right there. The NCAA essentially saying, hey, the way Tennessee handled this is how everybody that's under investigation from the NCAA should handle such process. North Carolina, Kansas, all these other schools, right? Donde Plowman goes on to say, while we take the appropriate responsibility last fall, the university announced that we will not self-impose penalties and harm innocent student athletes like postseason bans based upon the actions and coaches of staff members who are no longer a part of the institution. Under the NCAA's new construction, rules must ensure to the greatest extent possible, and the penalties imposed for infractions do not punish programs or student athletes not involved or implicated in these infractions. She goes on to say before concluding, while NCAA bylaws prohibit the university from publicly commenting about the specific allegations, we have and will continue to seek a timely resolution of the case that is consistent with the NCAA's new constitution and the best interest for the University of Tennessee. In the meantime, we will continue to support our football program's new leadership, our exceptional student athletes, and the culture of the winning and accountability they are building. End quote from Donde Plowman. Athletic directors Danny White also put out a statement on Friday, and his is much, much smaller than what Plowman said. Receipt of the notice of allegations was expected. A step in the process, a process our university initiated proactively through the decisive and transparent actions. This moves us one step closer to a final resolution. Until we get to that point, I am unable to discuss the case in any detail. As a university, we understand the need to take responsibility for what occurred, but we remain committed to protecting our current and future student athletes, end quote, from Danny White, who again took over the job with all this mess right in front of him. He was not here when all this went down. Remember, the university had Philip Former as his athletics director, and whenever they fired Jeremy Pruitt, Philip Former retired, but we all know kind of what that was. Essentially, hey, man, you hired Jeremy Pruitt, you're on the bag for this, so you need to get got. It's essentially what happened. But again, Philip Former still being paid by the University of Tennessee, so my whole thing on this is too, and I know a lot of you guys, and I've said it at points of times too, the NCAA just has no backbone. The NCAA has absolutely no cojones, essentially. It's just what the NCAA doesn't, it's what it lacks, right? So I'm intrigued to see if Tennessee just would have been like, you know what? We fired our coach, we fired 2 assistants, we started over, we have a new athletics director. We did our part. That's all we're going to do. We're going to move forward. I'm interested to see if Tennessee would have stopped there, what would have happened. But because Tennessee continued to move on, it continued to self-impose some recruiting restrictions over the past year and a half, because it did a whole number of different things that we don't even know about. It's reducing scholarships. Tennessee's not going to be an 85 this fall. I mean, Josh Heupel said that at SEC Media Days a couple of days ago. I'm interested to see what would have happened if Tennessee didn't do all that. If it just said, hey, we fired Pruitt, we're moving on, you know, it is what it is, right? But Tennessee did go above and beyond. Tennessee did do all this. And a lot of times it's a laughing stock around the country because, it's kind of like, well, why did you do all this? So I think because Tennessee has been so proactive in the notice of allegation, the NCAA literally says they have been fantastic. Anyone in this situation should do exactly what Tennessee did. It did not lack from institutional control or for lack thereof. I don't think Tennessee's gonna be killed by the NCAA. I truly, truly don't. I don't expect there to be a postseason bowl ban. Gosh, there's going to be no death penalty. That's not ever going to happen again. I know it happened back in the 80s, but not for Tennessee, but that will never, ever happen again. We'll see if there's any wins vacated. There's 18 level 1 violations. Jeremy Pruitt did not have 18 wins here at the University of Tennessee, but that would even kind of surprise me right here in the early going. So I know that was a lot of information that was just thrown at you, but bottom line, this was expected. This was not out of right field. Okay. Tennessee thought they were going to get this earlier in the summer, but it just so happened to come on Friday. Okay. This is essentially the second phase of a 4-step process to finally put this resolution behind it. Tennessee has until October 20th to respond to these notice of allegations, and then the NCAA will come back and divvy out its punishment. I do not think Tennessee will be hammered. I truly, truly do not believe Tennessee will be hammered whatsoever. And I just kind of think that it was a very, very, very expensive and costly time for the University of Tennessee that has already seemed to bounce back, finding a new head coach, recruiting very, very well, and so on and so forth. So I know there's articles out there from some national columnists that despise University of Tennessee and despise University of Tennessee fans. There's a lot of misinformation in some of those articles. I have read them. A lot of it is true. Some of it is not. But I think that we can all be smart enough to figure out what is true and what is not. So it's interesting. This is not the end of the world. It's really, really not the end of the world. It is a step in the process, and here they are, and Tennessee's looking to move on. So any questions you guys have, Twitter Tuesday @_Caner, @Locked On Vols. We will talk more about this as the week goes on. But excuse me, I want to get into the all SEC teams and the predicted order of finish for the NCAA. And hey, I might share with you how I voted on these preseason polls, all that more, and coming up here in just a second. As the sun comes out on small businesses and they're getting back in business, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people that you want to interview faster and for free. We've all been on LinkedIn Jobs to try to find a job for ourselves, but now you are a small business owner. You are trying to find the right person that you can trust that will take care of your baby, your product. You can do that at LinkedIn.com. Create free job posts in minutes to LinkedIn Jobs to reach out to a network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so the network can help find you the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know every single week that 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, guys, going to welcome you back into Locked On Vols, segment number 2 here on a Monday show, Twitter Tuesday. Plenty of questions, guys, at _Caner, at Locked On Vols. We're going to do that on tomorrow's show, so go ahead and get in your questions, your comments, whatever you got, please. It should be a big-time show that's coming up here on tomorrow. So we spoke notice of allegations in segment 1. Let's get on to the end result of SEC football media days. So, I broadcasted live from the College Football Hall of Fame last week at SEC Football Media Days in Atlanta. Had a great time. And before I left, myself and along with about 1,000 other media members who covered the event voted for our preseason All SEC predicted order of finish, as well as the preseason teams. There were 3 teams that the media selected, and I'll tell you how Tennessee fared on those teams, where Tennessee's predicted order of finish by the media is, and all that. And I'll show you exactly who I voted for on a couple of those as well, if I can pull that up here right now. And you guys can certainly nitpick my voting as well, but I think it's only fair. I'm going to show you my ballot because I like to critique a lot of what other people do, and I'm going to put my work where it is as well. So here we go. Tennessee had 8 players voted preseason All SEC teams. Byron Young, a first-team defensive lineman. You had Hendon Hooker, a second-team quarterback. Cedric Tillman, a second-team quarterback. Darnell Wright, a second-team offensive lineman. Cooper Mays, a third-team offensive lineman. Trevon Flowers, a third-team defensive back. Jeremy Banks, a third-team linebacker. And Paxton Brooks, a third-team punter. Alabama was predicted to win the SEC, picking up 158 first-place votes. Georgia had 18. South Carolina had 3, while Vanderbilt, just shows you the people really take this seriously, right? And Texas A&M picked up a vote as well. Tennessee is predicted to finish 3rd in the East behind Georgia and Kentucky. So a lot to unpack right there. All right, well, let's go ahead and do it to the best of our abilities. You had Tennessee finishing 3rd behind Georgia and Kentucky. I told you this all last week, and this is something that we'll continue to talk on up until the season begins. Who is the 3rd best team in the Southeastern Conference? You could go Texas A&M. You could go Arkansas. You could go Tennessee. You could go Kentucky. Some people were saying Florida. Tennessee was getting a lot of love. Kentucky was getting a lot of love. And it was the Kentucky Wildcats that just narrowly edged Tennessee and picked to finish 2nd in the East behind the Volunteers. Kentucky got 932 votes, total votes, finishing 2nd behind Georgia in the East, while Tennessee picked up 929, meaning by a margin of 3 votes. 3 votes. Kentucky just got right by Tennessee to finish, by the media, preseason 2nd, behind Georgia and in front of Tennessee. So Tennessee finishes 3rd, Florida finishes 4th, South Carolina finishes 5th, Missouri finishes 6th, and Vanderbilt finishes 7th. You look over the West, Alabama obviously picked to win the West. Texas A&M picked to finish 2nd. A sizable gap there, 968 votes for Texas A&M to finish 2nd. Arkansas, 844 votes to finish 3rd there. So you got a little over 100 votes in favor of Texas, about 120 in favor of A&M over Arkansas to finish 2nd in front of them and behind Alabama. Ole Miss finishes 4th, LSU 5th, Mississippi State finishes 5th, and Auburn finishes 6th. Your SEC champion Alabama picks up 158 first-place votes. Georgia got 18 first-place votes to win the conference. And then again, to show you that people really take this seriously, South Carolina picked up 3 votes to win the conference. Vanderbilt won, and Texas A&M won as well. My voting for the all-conference predicted order of finish is exactly the same. You look at Alabama, it was Alabama 1, A&M 2, Arkansas 3. My ballot, Alabama 1, A&M 2, Arkansas 3. Ole Miss was picked to finish 4th, LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn 4th through 7th. My ballot had Ole Miss, LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn 4th through 7th. So the way I voted was the way it ended up being. The East, of course, it was Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee. I voted Georgia to win the East, Tennessee to finish 2nd, and Kentucky to finish 3rd. I had Tennessee over Kentucky. The 4 through 7 in the East, it was Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, Vanderbilt. The way I voted was Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. The media picked Alabama to win the SEC. So did I. Let's go up to how I voted and what happened with the all conference teams. Okay, you had Bryce Young being the first team quarterback. No duh. You had Tank Bigsby, Jahmyr Gibbs of Alabama and Auburn, first team running backs. Okay, I can get that. Keyshawn Boutte, first team wide receiver, LSU. All right. Here's where Cedric Tillman should have came in my opinion, but he did not. You had Jermaine Burton, formerly of Georgia, now of Alabama, getting the first team nod. The way the media votes, okay, for all SEC teams, it says, hey, here's a position. So like for quarterback, it says vote your 2 quarterbacks. My first place vote was Bryce Young. My second place vote was Hendon Hooker. That's how it turned out, right? For running back, it says take your top 4 running backs. Your top 2 would go to your first team. The bottom 2 would go to the second team. All right. At wide receiver, I voted Keyshawn Boutte number 1. I voted Cedric Tillman number 2. Cedric Tillman finished 3rd. Jermaine Burton, who finished first team by the media, I voted him 3rd on my list. So that would have been a second team all conference member for me. And then Jonathan Mingo, who was awarded that 4th wide receiver slot on the second team, was who I voted for 4th. So the only difference between my votes and the rest of the media and how it turned out essentially was I had Tillman above Burton, but Tillman ended up being on the second team. Burton ended up being on the first team. All right, so you look at the tight end position overall. Brock Bowers, that's how I voted. And my second tight end was Cameron Latou of Alabama. He was on the second team. So pretty standard so far. Also, the way I voted running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a stud at Alabama. This is, and again, every voter is different. For me, he hadn't played running back in the SEC, so I'm not going to put him up there, right? Now, there's a contrary to that. I did put him as my all-purpose guy, but I did not vote Jahmyr Gibbs to be an all-conference running back. That's just kind of something that this voter thought that you're not going to do in preseason in a poll that doesn't matter to begin with. The way I voted running back was Chris Rodriguez 1, Tank Bigsby 2, Kenny McIntosh 3, and Devin Achane of Texas A&M 4. And all 3 of those guys voted in, plus Jahmyr Gibbs is how it kind of ended out being. Offensive tackle and guard, the way I voted, Nick Broker, offensive lineman of Ole Miss, was 1. They said, list your top 8 guards and tackles in the league. I voted Broker of Ole Miss 1, Robinson of A&M 2, Ecoyer, Alabama 3, Darnell Wright was my 4th guard tackle. Kenneth Horsey of Kentucky was 5th for me. Jeremy James was 6th of Ole Miss. Sirius Torrance of Florida was 7th, and then I voted Jerome Carbon 8th there for the guard tackle. The way it worked out was for your guard tackles, first team was Emil Ecoyer Jr. of Alabama, Warren McClendon of Georgia, Sirius Torrance of Florida, Nick Broker of Ole Miss. So the majority of mine were on there. Your second team was Layden Robinson of A&M, Kenneth Horsey of Kentucky, Darnell Wright of Tennessee. So Tennessee had a Darnell Wright there as a second team, and Javon Cohen of Alabama. So far, Tennessee has second team Hendon Hooker, second team Cedric Tillman, and second team Darnell Wright on that second team offense. At center, I voted Rick Stromberg and Cedric Van Pran. Those were the first and second team centers, and so the offense is done. Let's go to defense, shall we? The defensive line, first team, it was Jalen Carter of Georgia, B.J. Ojulari of LSU, Derek Hall of Auburn, and Byron Young of Tennessee. That was 4th. Tennessee gets a first team, the only one on the defensive line, and it is Byron Young. Now, for me, the way I voted, I actually had Byron Young on the second team. He was my 5th overall defensive lineman. I voted Jalen Carter 1, Derek Hall of Auburn 2, Byron Young of Alabama 3, and then B.J. Ojulari 4, and then I had Byron Young. But nonetheless, it's right on that fringe there, 5-4, and he was the fourth one voted in. But congratulations to Byron Young, Tennessee's lone first-teamer. Linebackers, you guys know I love linebackers. It is a strong class for the SEC. The media voted Will Anderson Jr. 1, Nolan Smith 2, and Henry To'oTo'o 3. The way I voted linebackers, Will Anderson 1, Nolan Smith 2. I voted Bumper Pool 3, and then I voted Henry To'oTo'o, but they flipped Bumper Pool and To'oTo'o. The rest of my votes were DeAndre Square and Brenton Cox Jr. of Florida, and all of those guys were represented on the second team. You continue to go on down. You look at the defensive backfield. The first team, it was Jordan Battle, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, and Jalen Catalon. That's how I voted as well. Jeremy Banks is your third team linebacker for Tennessee, and Trevon Flowers is a second team or a third team defensive back as well. So, and that's kind of how you kind of round it out there. Tennessee also had Paxton Brooks on the third team. I voted Paxton Brooks as my second team punter as well. So that was kind of my ballot, pretty similar to how it turned out to be. I had a couple nitpicky things here and there. We can kind of break down who and what makes sense if you guys have any questions, but that's kind of how I voted, the way I thought it should be. The big hang up for me, I had Cedric Tillman voted preseason all-conference first team. He ends up being second team. I think that should have been rectified. Jeremy Banks, honestly, should have been higher than third team, in my opinion, because he is a tackle machine. And there's some good linebackers. Brenton Cox Jr., Dallas Turner, and Bumper Pool, really good players there on the second team. But I would have flipped Jeremy Banks with Dallas Turner potentially, because Jeremy Banks had 128 tackles last season from that inside linebacker spot. But hey, that is just me. So those were the all-conference teams preseason. It doesn't mean a thing. It really, really doesn't. It is preseason all-SEC, and also there's 3 teams. You guys know, I think if you have anything over 2 teams in preseason voting, it's a little silly to begin with. But that's how it ended up being. This was my ballot. I like to show transparency and show you how kind of how I voted. And for the most part, it was about the same with what kind of handed out there. But I did have Tennessee finishing second over Kentucky in the East. The media overall picked Kentucky by 3 votes to finish better than Tennessee and the SEC East as well. Big stories coming out of SEC Media Days to kind of conclude the week. Also, Tennessee picked up a commit on Saturday, or on Friday as well, and Saturday for the class of 2024. We're going to have to get to that later in the week, but Tennessee did pick up wide receiver commit Nathan Laycock for the class of 2023, and Carson Gentle, defensive lineman for the class of 2024. That was on Saturday as well. We'll get to that later in the week. But coming up next here on Locked On Vols, we heard my conversation one-on-one with Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman last week. Now, I'm going to play my conversation with Trevon Flowers, Tennessee defensive back, and third-team All-SEC preseason voted on by the media, Trevon Flowers. That is coming up next here to conclude a Monday show. Out here with Tennessee safety Trevon Flowers, back in the home city here in Atlanta, representing Tennessee. How's the day been so far for you?
It's been great, man. Blessed. That's all I can say. Blessings.
What's obviously when you look at the 2022 season, you want you want to get better across the board. You want the defense to get better. What's your role in trying to accomplish that, being a leader back there in the secondary?
Just being able to correct stuff now. You don't want to wait until we're in the moment to kind of correct things. That's how you cause controversy. But you kind of want to correct things now, man. You want to be able to, focus, rely on your training in moments like that, rely on your habits, and creating good habits now, not missing any reps, things like that will play big dividends in the long run when the game's on the line, when it's third down, or the defense, we're tired, we're on the field for a long time, just stuff like that we can rely on our training and be able to have good habits when we're tired, when we're exhausted, and be able to execute our job.
I know you've probably been asked this a ton, and the two situations are not the same. But you see what happened with Theo last year, the jump he made in his last year. What did you think about that from afar, and then what steps are you taking to try to do the same thing?
I definitely learned from those guys, man. We always talk about offense and things like that, but on the defensive side, we have players. Like we have guys, and we develop crazy over time and actually end up being great players. So that's just the biggest thing, being able to develop, being able to look yourself in the mirror and be like, what can I do to improve? What do I have to sacrifice to be the best version of me? And seeing Theo, not just Theo, but Alante as well, sacrifice things and to to get where they are now. Do whatever, like ignored all the negative stuff and just focused on the task that was in front. That really showed me that all you got to do is focus. All you got to do is try to lock in where your 2 feet are and not worry too much about the future or the past, or stay level-headed into where you at, and the rest will take care of itself.
What do you like about that front seven in front of you? You got a couple of veterans, Barron, Young, you got Banks there in the middle. What do you like about those front guys?
Oh, I love it, man. I got some dogs in front of me. That's all I know. I got some dogs, and seeing what they're doing now this offseason just makes me more confident. Like, them guys are busting their butts, doing everything right. They're definitely embracing the process now, which was something we might have lacked just a little bit, embracing every process. Like, those guys, like, as we were younger, we kind of just wanted to play football. Like, football. Now that we've grown, we realize that it's not just football, man. All that from school, what you're doing in the classroom, from how you talking to people, how you communicating, how you carrying yourself, your brand, all that stuff, their habits, all that stuff relays in how we're gonna execute on the field, honestly. And you can tell that those guys have understood that, and they dialed in to where how they do everything is how they do anything.
2 newcomers via transfers, Andre Turrentine and Wesley Walker. How are they adapting to the room? And I know there's a lot of positions where we don't know exactly who's going to play where. I mean, Christian Charles is like that as well. But for a group, you guys can y'all are all so versatile. Those 2 guys are as well. How unique and how much of a dividend will that be later on?
Oh man, it's going to be great. Those guys definitely came in. It's almost like they've been here. They understand the culture. They understand the standards. Their work ethic is amazing. They're ready to work. They definitely have the same goal as all of us in the room, and having that is always better than having none. Those guys, once they learn, they're learning everything now. But once they really understand the playbooks and stuff like that, man, they're going to be able to play any position as well. So our depth will be amazing back there, and we definitely have multiple guys we can trust.
Last thing, you want to win every single game. You have high expectations, but I mean, Tennessee took such a step last year, and you returned so many players this year. What's the mindset of the team right now? Like, what do you guys? How good do you guys think you truly are?
Honestly, I've been so much into this business stuff, but I'm gonna keep it real with you. I think we can be the best team in the country. Yeah, I'm in at that.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
That is going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols. Great stuff there by Tennessee's Trevon Flowers, and quite a bold take there at the end there at that end of that interview. Hope you guys caught that, because I was surprised as well. But as a player, that's the way you want to have your mindset, surely, going into a season. So big thanks to Trevon Flowers and Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman for taking some time last Thursday to chat with me down in Atlanta at SEC Media Days. Hope you guys enjoyed that. So coming up later in the week, we still got to get into more of this notice of allegations. We still got to get into some of this preseason all-SEC stuff. Twitter Tuesday is coming up tomorrow. I know it's going to be a full show. You guys will have tons of takes and comments. I'm looking forward to that. Also, in the bag, I'll have a conversation with Bill Hancock, director of the College Football Playoff Committee, and a conversation with former Tennessee offensive coordinator, former Duke head coach and Ole Miss head coach, and former quarterback guru for the Mannings, David Cutcliffe. Had a great conversation with David Cutcliffe. I can't wait to give it to you guys here on Locked On Vols at some point this week. So, guys, thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen. Now, make Locked On SEC your second listen. My guy, Chris Gordy, was down there with us in Atlanta, and he was taking interviews from players and coaches all around the SEC. He'll be turning those out, for the weeks leading up to the season. So give Locked On SEC a listen right behind your first listen, which is Locked On Vols every single day. Guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate you for tuning back in. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever, on YouTube as well. The goal is 3,000 subscribers on YouTube before football season, and it won't take us long at all to get to the overall goal, which is 5,000 by the end of football season. We're going to shatter that, so I can't wait for that. Guys, thank you so much. Really, really do appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Couldn't do this without you. We'll do it again tomorrow. Same time, same place. We'll do it here on Locked On Vols.